Gentlemen, welcome back. Today we have a much less exciting video. I was driving through Atlanta the other day and I stopped to let some air out of the tires because, believe it or not, 2500 on race suspension rides like shit on Atlanta roads. So I was dropping the tires down to like 50 psi to kind of smooth things out, and I noticed got a puddle forming underneath the truck. So that's not normal. So I pop the hood and start poking around in there, and well, my Hydroboost is leaking. Now, I'm not made of money. I know. We thought you were. But no, I'm not. So, today, we're going to rebuild the Hydroboost on my 2012 Ram. So, I'll hook you in here, show you kind of the process of getting it out of the truck, and then we'll throw it on the bench and we will figure it out together, I guess. Have you ever done one? I haven't. So here's our brake master. Behind that, back there in the spaghetti of hydraulic hoses, is our Hydroboost brake booster. Now, this is not like a normal brake booster on most cars where it's vacuum actuated. This is actually ran from the power steering pump. So you'll see the seam just behind those bolts that you can see, and it's actually dripping from there. So I have a sneaking suspicion that it's actually leaking from the double lip seal that actually rides on the piston. We've got to unbolt the master cylinder from the Hydroboost, and we're not going to take it all the way off. We're just going to kind of scoot it forward. Then we're going to jump inside. We're going to disconnect the brake lever, get it loosened from the firewall. I guess before that we'll do the hydraulic lines, get all that off. So before I get too far ahead of myself trying to crane over the side of this thing, I like to take the valve stems out of this truck in particular, because I get, you know, she just kneels down for me. Well, that makes all the difference. This truck's not here anymore. You know, I can get my dick beaters in there. So, first and foremost, we have a soft line and two hard hydraulic lines that we need to get off of this thing. I want to do the lines before I take the master or take the booster loose from the firewall, just so that everything is not moving around on me. So I should point out that rebuilding this is the same for Ford, Chevy, and Ram, because believe it or not, the rebuild kit, the part numbers are exactly the same for the Ford, the Ram, and the Chevrolet from all of the ones that I looked at before I bought the cheapest one online. So your hoses, your lines, all that stuff, taking it off the truck might be different, but once we get inside this sucker, it should be exactly the same no matter which flavor of truck you drive. So both of these lines are on the Ram, an 18 millimeter. And Thor himself put that one on. And, well, where has this heat come from all of a sudden? It has been cold and rainy and ugly for like 3 months. And then today it's just going to be 1,000 degrees. So I've got all three lines off my Hydroboost now. We're going to take the two bolts that hold the master cylinder to the Hydroboost off. We should not lose any fluid, and our brakes will not lose prime. What will lose prime from this is just the power steering system, because it feeds from the power steering pump. And that should be simple as just cycling it a bunch of times and it'll bleed with the cap off when we're done. throw the cap back on, top it off, and so on the rim, these are a 14 millimeter. It's the next week now, and I finally got that bolt out and the master cylinder off of the brake booster. And it's full of fluid in there. That valley actually should be dry. So my suspicions were correct on it needing to be rebuilt. Let's jump inside the truck. We'll knock out the 4 bolts and the connecting rod that holds it to the pedal, and we'll get this thing out of here. So we're inside the truck now, and you'll see here on the brake pedal, this rod is what actually actuates the Hydroboost. We've got a little spring clip right there in the center of the screen. We've got a pop off to get the rod free. We've got the 4 bolts on the firewall that hold the brake booster on. So I'm going to knock those out real quick, and I'll touch back when I've got it on the table. So before we obviously put new parts and stuff in it, we'll just clean it up before we get it on the bench, so we can keep everything clean. Okay, so we got our Hydroboost cleaned up and back on the healing bench. Upon further inspection, it looks like it's only the same for the Ram and the General Motors trucks. So it may be a little different for the Ford. I'm not sure. Seemed to be some misinformation somewhere on the interwebs. I don't know if I'm following the correct order of operations here. We're going to go ahead and knock this thing apart. Do you have one of these yet? Well, why not? Interesting. So as I'm getting into this thing, I'm realizing that this is going to be a pain in the old keister here. But that's okay. We will prevail. So this little dude is, I believe this is the accumulator check valve. Yeah, this is the accumulator check valve here. So you've got a needle on a detent there, and you've got a ball on the back side. So that's going to be the accumulator check valve, check ball. We should have a new O-ring seal for this. None of those look like that. All right. Accumulator check valve, resealed. So in the large journal where our piston actually works, we've got an O-ring seal here, and this is what actually leaks on these things. This and the gasket that holds the 2 halves of the booster together. Your lips are going to want to be pointing you, facing you as they install in this journal. You just get it started and work it around, and it goes right in the slot. There is a gasket that goes between the 2 halves of the casement right here. We'll pull that, the new one in. Okay, so this little plastic piece goes in this bore. Don't forget this, because once you put this in, the check valve, once the check valve goes in error, before that goes in, it's really, really hard to get this dude back out. So make sure you do it right the first time. You shouldn't have an issue. Now, we've got our check valve in. We went ahead and replaced the lip seal. I'm going to go ahead and reiterate, make sure that the lip is facing you, facing towards the bore, because it has to seal against the piston of the booster, and that's just how a double lip seal works. So once you've got that done, we're going to take, and so if you look closely on this lever, there are 2 notches that ride along your spool assembly. Your spool assembly goes into the small journal, obviously. The small spring goes inside of that. And this is your drive rod that actually makes everything work. We're not replacing the spring retainer because ours is in good shape. The seal side does go inside of this piston like that. So make sure that you're keeping your small plunger on the groove or on the teeth of the other. We've got both springs in place and both plungers on the ready. Your small one is going to start first, and it goes in pretty easy. Then we're going to stand it up because the large piston has the spring and the through rod. So you just want to lift it up until you get the rod centered in your hole and your spring centered on the seat. And once you do that, you're lined up and ready to send it home. So as you can see, it will compress. I'm not forcing or binding anything up to do that. And we'll go through and I'm going to torque that to spec. And there you have it. That is a somewhat resealed Bendix brake booster. There may be some differences between brands, whether it be Chevy, Ford, Dodge, whatever. They all use the same, essentially the same booster. I guess when something works, everybody uses it. So I think that's where I'm going to head this video off. Installation is the opposite of disassembly. And if you've made it this far and followed along, I'm sure you can figure out the rest. I assume that the parts kit comes with the parts needed for various models, years, obviously brand uses. So what I wound up actually needing out of this kit was just 1 or 2 of the small O-rings and the double lip seal for the plunger. I didn't actually use the new plastic piece. Like I said, this thing was working fine before. And I couldn't find enough information on what all these little pieces are through, quick search. And I have a lot of stuff I have to get done today outside of the shop, so I've got to get this thing back in the truck and I got to get the ball rolling. So, like I said, I'm going to throw it in. I'm not going to show installation because we already did a teardown and removal from the truck. I am going to torque this to spec once I find the torque specs. But in the meantime, thank you guys for watching. Thanks for subscribing. If you don't mind, leave me a like. If you're not subscribed, hit the button. It doesn't cost you anything. It's free. And it helps me out tremendously. So, thanks for hanging out in the shop, guys. See you later.